Congresswoman Summer Lee. I'm so excited to have you in the building today. Really looking forward to it. Like, even just getting to know you, doing my research and my prep, all that. I was just like, I knew this was going to be a good time. So I'm really excited to be chatting. So thank you for being here.
No, thanks for having me.
Okay, before we kind of get into the real stuff and the politics and all of that, I just want to kind of know, like, what is your ideal? You're back in Pittsburgh. You have a day off. You don't have any commitments. Like, what is your ideal Sunday like in Pittsburgh?
Oh, you know what? I am such like an old-fashioned person. Every Sunday, I probably go to brunch or something. I know how internet people are like, "Oh my God, you're a bruncher." I'm like, "Yeah, I gotta eat. And I like some sweet. I like a pancake on a Sunday.
Okay.
Sometimes
pancake, cinnamon roll, any of that stuff? Yeah.
Maybe not a cinnamon roll.
Okay.
But
Pancakes
or something.
Yeah.
No, I'll probably either make myself some food. Maybe have a couple of people over, make some things. My family. I spend every Sunday with my family. My grandma, when she is in town, because my grandma and Mr. Grandpa are actually kind of somewhat bi-coastal.
Okay.
So sometimes they're in Vegas, sometimes they're in Pittsburgh. Well, my grandma's in Pittsburgh. My grandma is making Sunday dinner every single Sunday. And when she doesn't, she tells us at the very last minute. And she's just like, "You're on your own."
So your Sunday stuff is like family gathering, like let's hang out and cook breakfast and chill.
I have a big family.
Okay. Because you just told me before we turned on, you live very close to your mom in
And
Pittsburgh.
I live close to my mom, and my mom lives close to her mom.
Okay.
So we are not far away.
So it's like the family street, family neighborhood, that whole vibe.
Yeah.
Okay, I love it.
It's pretty close. But that's what we do every Sunday.
Okay, cool. And then in terms
boring.
of look, like it sounds like you love your family.
They're
always
cute.
good. Yeah, and if they're around, I mean, look, you love like family, you fight like family, you do all of that. I just went home a few weeks ago, and I was in, my parents are in Asheville, North Carolina, and we were joking about the fact that, my brother and I are full-grown adults, and you still get home, and you kind of revert back to like being a kid, like the behaviors and the bickering you do with your siblings. And
very happy for my mom to do mom things.
Yeah.
Very happy for it. I got some doctor's appointments that I would need to. I have doctors and dentists that I would need to have visited.
Yeah.
But where is my mom?
Yeah. Wait, I think people, even if you're like 40 and 50 and above, if your parents are still there, you're still going to call them and be like, "Help, what is this thing?"
It's how we keep them alive.
Yes.
They give us the gift of life, and then we give it back to them.
And we stress them out forever, basically.
We give it back to them by giving them purpose.
I know. Okay, so besides Good Day in Pittsburgh, you obviously have a busy schedule. You don't probably get a ton of time to yourself, but like, is there anything like show, song, album, like anything pop culture right now that like is keeping you alive and keeping you going right now?
You know what? I sit in silence a lot. The reality show that plays in my head, it's
way better than anything else.
No, but you know what? Okay, so let me think. This is going to be the the oldest thing that you will ever know about me is that I do is because of my mom. It's my mom. My mom makes me watch General Hospital. Yeah, she is like held a gun to my head. She makes me watch it.
Way.
So I have to keep up with it now because of her. But I also just finished. Okay, so I just finished binging the last season of The Bear.
Okay.
Not the same as the first season, but we're still there.
So I feel like the take on it's that like 1 and 2 was great, 3 was hard to watch, and 4 was an improvement, I guess, on the last one.
I think that's my assessment.
Okay.
1 got me in.
And 2 I love too.
2 was beautiful because they started to dive into the characters. And then one thing I will say about The Bear, outside of everything else, they're going to scream all day. I don't get that. I truly wish that they would move away from that little trope.
Yeah.
Just do the characters.
100%.
The characters are beautiful.
I'm from Chicago, so I love, to me, it's like such a love letter to Chicago. And they, even like the suburbs they go to, it's like all the suburbs that I'd go to, like for swim and dive meets growing up and all that stuff. So it's fun to see all those places. I love an Italian beef, all that stuff. So I love it too as a lover. Oh, okay. The next time you're there.
I've never been, so before 2 years ago, before I came to Congress, I had never been to Chicago in my life.
Okay.
I had never been. I went the first summer, like since I had been in Congress, and I loved it. I did not think I would. I'm not going to say how many times I've been back since. I've been a few times.
Okay.
I've been a few times since, but I had never been.
It is such a great summer city. It is. I always tell people too, I'm like, if you're going for the first time, I don't know if you've done it, architecture tour in the boat along the river. Like I always tell people it's the first thing if you like kind of want to get to know the city pretty well. But food perspective, do an Italian beef. I know the beef is the one from the show. Al's Italian beef is great. Portillo's is a classic. One of those 3, I think you'll find yourself pretty happy.
When I was there for a conference. So a lot of friends, homies were there abounds. One of my friends was like, "I think everybody is going to this place called The Bean." And I was like, I don't know why, because we're not on the coast, but I was like, I feel like they're saying the beach. And he's like, no, I think they're saying the bean.
The bean.
The bean. As it turns out, there was a bean and a beach.
Yes, they're both. And people the beach part throws people off because they're like,
the beach
why is there a sandy beach on a lake?
The beach threw me off. We were just walking that night. It was very quiet out. We were just walking that night and literally walked into a beach. And that was how I found out that you guys have almost a full-fledged beach.
I think it's interesting for Chicago. People like to, I feel like on the East Coast, and I've been on the East Coast for a decade now, but people leave the city on the weekends in so many East Coast places. Yeah. Well, yeah, and
you can go a lot of places.
And in Chicago, people flock into the city on the weekends because you've got the beach and there are festivals and all this stuff. Yeah. And so that was a different thing for me when I moved here. I was like, oh, like people kind of leave when it's hot out and the city's baking and all of that. So there's no beach here
in Pittsburgh, but we'll get a festival. We just had Picklesburg. Pittsburgh loves pickles now.
Okay,
Arts Fest, things of that nature. So when it's not raining, we try to go outside.
Okay. Quick question for you, because I had the pleasure of chatting with your good friend Delia Ramirez not too long ago. I got to hear her perspective, of course, on how you met and all of that, but I would just love for you to talk. I'd love to get your take on your friendship with her, like how it keeps you through bad weeks, bad days, bad nights, whatever. I would just love to hear a little more about it.
Let me tell you this. I have never so I was in the State House before I was in Congress. I have never been in either of these positions without my people, people. And I know if I had to, when I went to the State House, I came in with 2 other women, and then we met another. So it was a group of 4 of us who were just values aligned, similar age range. We were all brand new. We all came in at the same time, and we were all committed to being we're going to be able to do our politics this way because we're going to make sure that they don't break us up, right? That they can't, get in through us. That changed the game for us.
Yeah.
I remember hearing about so many women who would get into, elected office, and, they were like, oh, the first woman in this role, that role. But you would notice that they didn't last long because they were often going into just the most male dominated, just if you're also progressive, the most regressive places. It don't matter what type of stuff you're made of. To navigate this by yourself, you shouldn't have to, and it is not sustainable.
Do you feel like that happens on the Hill in general, where when people lump together that maybe an opposition or basically tries to peel people off in order to isolate them and try to pull them into their fold or something like that?
Yeah, I bet it does.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that these institutions want you to move in them the way that it intends you to move. And when that's why it's so important to have your girlfriends, right? That's why it's important to have your crew. So when me and Delia had already talked.
Yep.
We'd already met. We've been on the circuit. But when we got to orientation, here we both are, right? We're 2 freshmen. We both had similar trajectories. We're progressive women, first Black woman from Pennsylvania, first Latina from the whole Midwest. And we're okay, we got to navigate this new thing. We didn't have, we didn't know how money, how we would, how do you get a house here? How do you find a place to live?
Do they talk about any of that stuff?
No.
Oh, really? So that's surprising to me because, right, the point of all of this.
If you have people who you can call, if you just happen to know another member of Congress, somebody might tell you.
Yeah.
We were lucky. We had a couple people, and when they first started, I remember, actually, I think it was Ayanna Pressley called me to say, what are you going to do with your hair? I know that doesn't sound like a problem that most people will have. She's like, but you're Black. You're going to be on the camera all the time. Do you want to get heat damage? Right? Just little stuff like that. What are you going to do with your hair?
Yeah.
Corey came and said, what are you going to do about an apartment? She was like, look, you don't get your first paycheck until February. Starting January, you don't get your first paycheck until February, but you got to have somewhere to live, for orientation.
What are you going to do for rent? Yeah, exactly.
What are you going to do about rent? Because then, we had to pay, you got to pay for your house in your hometown, and you got to pay for something here. And rent is not cheap here. So me and Delia literally just at the same time just looked at each other and said,
we're splitting rent.
It was do you have somewhere to live? And we were both like, do you want to live together? And that was literally how it was. And then the very next day, a house just kind of dropped into our laps. We were very lucky. Very lucky. And we just,
She said Greg Kassar kind of came in with the assist.
Yeah, Greg Kassar didn't want to stay at this place. But it was another member of Congress because, members of Congress used to buy houses in D.C. in the 90s for, the cost of a sandwich and, theater tickets.
Yep.
And now those houses are worth millions of dollars. So that is not our reality in Congress in 2025.
Yep. That has changed a little bit.
But that's how we came together. And I think orientation was so heavy before that because I'm not rich. She's not rich. We don't come from money. I think everybody assumes that people who navigate Congress are rich.
Yeah.
That they have access. Like, I don't know Congress people. You know, I didn't know that.
Well, especially you were in the state house before that. So it's you know, you're not some CEO multimillionaire. You're coming from the state house and now you're elected member of Congress and
before that
you gotta
I was
figure it
coming
out.
from, you know, Swissville. You know, brought out before that. You know, I'm not coming from access. So that part is stressful. That is stressful. And then, you know, that's just one part of the stress. Then like orientation, you get in and then it's like, well, what are you going to do about healthcare? Everybody thinks we have great healthcare. No, we're like on the Obamacare exchange. So we are navigating it like other people are, you know, trying to figure out what is the difference between a POS and
an HMO and the PPO and the silver plan and the gold plan.
You know, you want a higher deductible or do you want this? We're doing that.
Yeah.
We're doing all of that while we're trying to figure out how am I going to pay on January 1st for mortgage and a rent in 2 different places.
And then I have to go do the whole legislating part of my life as well, which is the other,
So that too, me and Delia, you know, we all have our families here. She's, you know, one of the few people who I know. And we get in here and it's the first day is January 3rd. And they're like, you got to go to the house and you got to start voting at 12. And no one tells us anything. We don't have a pen yet. They're like, go and get your pen from the speaker's lobby. I don't know what a speaker's lobby is. My family is lost. Like another member of Congress found my family wandering around and they got them to the gallery.
I hope, after hearing all this, like I hope someone adjusts like whatever the onboarding curriculum is for Congress.
I didn't even know how to vote. Right? It was like, oh, then they're all telling you things at the last minute. They're like, oh, you gotta, when it's time for you and they call your name, you stand up and go to the front because this is your moment. And then say the name of, you know, whoever you're voting for. This is the speaker vote. So we know nothing.
I'm hoping that this part of the conversation serves as a little bit of a nudge to whoever puts that on together or puts that together for the 2028 orientation. Hopefully they lift it up a little bit. Okay. You mentioned you grew up in Western Pennsylvania with working class family. How did your childhood, and you represent the district that you grew up in now, how did your childhood shape how you viewed your district?
You know, I think that especially, you know, dealing with the perceptions of Congress, and it's not just perception. You know, there are people here who really did come from wealth. And there are people who also came from, you know, middle class background. I didn't come from either. You know, I came from a working class background. And, you know, I grew up in a community, you know, love my community. Everybody loves their community. I love my community. You know, I went to public schools. You know, I know folks who went to MIT and are doctors today. And I also know folks who didn't make it, you know, literally. You know, I've known gun violence. I've known, you know, the life that is afforded to you when you know, are in Congress. I've seen, you know, all those things in between.
Yeah.
You know, growing up, working class, growing up with, you know, my mama, you know, she's Black single mom. You know, she's working multiple jobs, you know, so that we can get by, but she's also making sure that, you know, I'm still on track because she has a kid who, you know, questions authority too much, right? That's how I grew up. I grew up questioning authority. And I'm so grateful that I had a mom who was annoyed by it. Absolutely annoyed.
But, I mean,
but let it happen.
Yeah, you have this very inherent, clear sense of like confidence. I'm sure you got that from her.
My mom is very confident. She is also. But no, you know, everyone doesn't have it, right? Sometimes, and I will tell you, even just like culturally, to have people who you know, you're growing up in this situation, and to have a mom who is just like, look, I'm gonna let her. Every now and then, if the teacher's wrong, the teacher's wrong. If she has to say something, she's gonna say it. She cannot help it, right? My mom was like one of those people. She was like, she can't help it. Did I still get a punishment? Absolutely. Was I in trouble? Yes. But like she didn't, like she knew that there was not worth stopping it.
Yeah.
She's very proud of that to this day. But also, you know, again, when you grow up with a mom, my mom grew up working on tips. To fight for working class people is just inherent to me. To see how, you know, inequality is cyclical. Like I saw it firsthand. It's like that's something that I read in a book. This is something that I've lived through. Like I know that racism and inequality are cyclical because I lived through the cyclical nature of these things. I know that there is a political and a policy answer to them because there was a policy, you know, foundation to it.
How often when you talk to your colleagues about it, whether Democrat or Republican, do you feel like when you talk about your background or upbringing, maybe you don't talk about it as much with them, but when you do, like, how often do you feel it getting through to them versus just kind of like going in one ear and out the other?
I think more in the beginning of my career, you know, when I was in the state house, and I still do it to this day. I have this theory, right? If I'm going to go into a room with folks, I'm not going to be the only person who's uncomfortable. So, that's just my commitment. And when we're talking about things that have to do with that type of cyclical inequality, when it deals with people who are marginalized, working class, poor, I'm going to speak up, and I'm going to say, hey, have you even considered that the why behind that? Have you considered the systemic issue behind it, or are you being lazy, right? And it makes them uncomfortable. It makes people very uncomfortable to hear that. And sometimes you'll get, the congressperson will be like, oh yeah, you know what? It's funny. I had an exchange with a member, a chairman, on Ed and Labor Committee.
Okay.
And it was the day that we were doing we were in committee about to do the cuts for the big, ugly bill. So for our cuts, they were student loans. It was, student loan spending and borrowing. It was Pell Grants. It was all the things that would have kept me from being able to be in a place like this. So, right. Yeah. I had already given my, my regular remarks. And then a member behind me was like, Summer, you want to keep saying, you want to say something? You want to say something? Because he was, talking about, oh, well, opportunity, or you'll figure it out. And that's what he said to me. He was like, oh, well, I'm sure just hearing you right now, I'm sure you would have made it anyways. You would have figured it out. And I'm like, what a condescending thing to say.
Yeah. And I guess my question for you that is, when that stuff happens, I know that stuff happens in committee and cameras are on and all that stuff's happening. Does that stuff like behind the scenes too? Do you ever go up to people and are like, hey, like, I'm not performing this. Like, this is my experience. Like, why can't you get it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that just like grinds my gears in this place is that, we will have these exchanges. These exchanges are real. These exchanges are real for me because I'm not performing. When I'm talking about who is going to be harmed by these cuts, when I talk about who's harmed, by the corporate duopoly, I mean that. I mean that in my spirit. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not performing for anybody's camera. We can put a camera, like we can hold a camera up to my face and we can do that ourselves if we just wanted a camera. Yeah. Then they come up to you after the end of being like, oh, well, we're going to deport all your family members. We're going to arrest all of them. We're going to cut we're going to cut your schools. We're going to do this, that, and forth. And then we'll come up to you at the end of the day, and they will kiki with you like you are old pals. Summer, how's your family? How's your mom doing? I do not let them do that to me.
And so I think that is what's so interesting.
I know, but I see so many people do that because it's just like it has become normalized here. They're like, I got to survive this place. So you know what? I will say, I know that I just got into it with this Republican, but you know what? For my own sanity, when he asks me, how the kids, I'm gonna just tell him, and I don't do it. I don't like it. I don't do it.
I think what you're talking about too is like it's this kind of the old school traditional like decorum part of Congress, and it's, I think that is obviously what is very hard for people right now, is like trying to find what that line is between trying to find where there is like some compromise or where you can work across the aisle on stuff, and then also being rightfully pissed off when it's, exactly, when
harmed.
Yes.
Right. And that's the difference.
Yeah.
When we talk about like the old school decorum, the way that people used to do it here, right? At the back in the day, the biggest difference between, Democrats and Republicans was their party registration.
Yeah.
There was two teams. It was the Yankees and the Mets playing. At the end of the day, they would go and they would have a cigar. At the end of the day, they were legislating my life though, and people like me weren't here. The difference now, when people talk about, well, where's civility, where's all this, and where's that? Well, the difference now is that the people who have been harmed, or the people who have been compromised and sacrificed, right, whichever side we're talking about, well, those people are here now. Yeah. Right? Congress looks different. So now the problem with the compromise is that, the people who they have to compromise with, they don't appreciate having to compromise with the people who they used to be able to just like kind of never see, out of sight, out of mind. Or, we're here and we're like, well, you know what? Why do we have to keep compromise? How do you have, 3 yachts and you're asking me to compromise and I don't have 3 dinners?
Yeah.
So those are different dynamics. Like the demographics have shifted. Poor people are here now. Working class people are here. Black and brown people. We have immigrants. Not just, the children of immigrants. We have immigrants, actual immigrants here now, right? We have disabled folks. We have a more representative body. So the decorum behind, I'm going to sign a piece of paper that will literally kill your community. And we're going to go out and have a cigar.
And have a beer, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what is that? That can't exist in these dynamics anymore. And there are so many people who are ignoring that is actually what's the difference.
Yeah. And I think what you're talking about too is, it feels uneven in terms of like this feeling right now of, it feels like Democrats keep making compromises and then not having them reciprocated. And I think that's clearly where the passion for you.
Yeah. Democrats are expected to be bipartisan.
Yeah.
And no one no one has expected a bipartisanship anything from Republicans in what, decades?
Yeah, I mean, probably since 2008, 9. Honestly, probably further.
Yeah.
I know sometimes people look back to like Newt Gingrich in the 90s, and that a lot of that being kind of the mark of like
the 90s was a really long time ago. I know it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, trust me, it does. I barely remember them. So, is there from your childhood growing up? Is there like a political memory you have, like a political event that like sticks with you that like almost jump-started your interest in politics?
For my childhood?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, because
I was very not political.
Okay.
I was a quintessential kid from, from where I was from.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about politics. I'm outside with my cousins, riding bikes, and, hoping my mom doesn't scream at me for not being in before the street lights are out. You know, I was not in school. I was not one of those kids in school who was just like obsessed with like political science.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing any of that. I played basketball, I ran track, I used to
You're doing
be
kid
outside.
stuff.
I was outside fighting kids.
Yeah.
Like I was fighting kids sometimes. I'm very grateful that like zero tolerance policies didn't exist when they could have got me.
So when did you feel yourself, I guess, stumble on politics then? Like at what point in your life?
I think that there are 2 points where I stumbled, where I stumbled into politics. I think the one I didn't realize it, right? When I was in college, I think, and both of them was because I needed a job. Mm-hmm. I needed a job in college. So I ended up being like a little field organizer during the Barack Obama campaign when I was at Penn State. And I was just one of the people registering people to vote. It's a college campus, right? So it's like, we're at Penn State. So, we have kids from New York, we have kids from DC, we have kids from Philly and Pittsburgh, obviously, and Maryland. And I'm like, all you guys live in blue states. You should just register to vote here, right? So that was like my first, I think that was my first stint in like electoral politics.
Okay.
And it was just for a job. Yeah. I found myself, again, looking for a job in 2016. This is, I think, the electoral politics directly. Yeah. By then, I was thinking about like cyclical racism
and what you care about. Yeah. But then
you
ended up working. You were campaigning for Bernie in 2016, right?
I actually voted for Bernie. Yeah. I did not get into the campaign until after.
Okay.
After the election. Yeah.
Okay.
I was with the PA Dems.
What drew you to him initially?
Bernie?
Yeah.
I believed that people should have healthcare. I believed that before I even had heard the phrases, I am a person who was just like, what is the energy around you? Who are the type of people who you're activating? And here was a campaign that I think was really trying to tap into grassroots energy far more than I think the establishment was even attempting to do.
I was like, do you remember where you felt? I think it's easy for people to forget now. When he announced initially, everybody kind of like laughed it off and like, who is this guy with the crazy hair that looks like he just rolled out of bed? And like, is this even serious? And so it's fun. I think it's easy to forget that like at the beginning, it kind of was like this joke to people. And so I'm curious for you, like how you found it and like what, like how you ended up feeling like, oh, like I
don't recall. I was not naive. And I recall remembering like, oh, this is definitely a long shot. Yeah. But I just knew it was a long shot from talking to like my family. Mm-hmm. We had a very obvious family divide, generational divide. Me and my sister voted for Bernie in the primary. We're in Pennsylvania, so it didn't even matter at that point. Yeah. So me and my sister voted for Bernie. My mom and my grandma voted for Hillary, and we chuckled it off. And then I spent the rest of my time. So then I spent the November up until the November election organizing. Okay. And that is the thing that kind of set me up. Right after that election, my school was in the news. And we had all these issues at my school. And I had already had all these thoughts. Like, well, why don't people engage in politics? I was like, well, they don't have time. They don't feel like anything is ever going to change. Yeah. They don't feel like their participation will make a difference. I was like, and I was thinking hyper-local, like school board, because of the school situation. And then I went to a school board meeting and it was terrible, right? Everybody came. It was packed. So I was like, well, here's your evidence that people in this neighborhood care about their kids because they're here, right? They're showing up. They're in an overflow room. They wouldn't let them speak in advance like they often do. Like they'll move, the public comment up sometimes when there's a big vote. They didn't do that for them. They made them wait until the very end and they stayed anyways. The vote had already happened. We lost. Those people still stayed to be heard. So I was not going to speak, right? I wasn't a public speaker then, but I was like, I just felt compelled to be like, listen, this is the reason why people are not engaging in politics. That's why they're not coming to school board meetings. And then everybody wanted to talk to me after that. Like school board members wanted to meet me, and like the news wanted to talk to me. I was a no one.
So do you think it's like some sort of almost like a domino effect? I've heard you talk about expanding the electorate a little bit, and I was gonna ask you a question, kind of what that actually looks like on the ground. And for you, is it starting local and getting people engaged in this stuff that's going to impact their everyday lives, and then it sort of balloons out into more national politics then?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
But I mean, for me, it was like that was the example. But it was really actually the thought behind it was like, well, people don't vote because they don't have anybody to vote for. It was a basic thought. People don't vote, they don't have anybody to vote for, right? We, in Western PA, we have folks who have been on a ballot for 20 years uncontested. I had this theory. I was like, I don't know who my state rep is, so why would anyone else know? That was the bet that I made when someone convinced me to run. I never considered running for office, but I was just like, well, can I go? Can I send people someplace I'm not willing to go myself? Because I'm trying to get people to run.
Who asked you in the first place? And was it an immediate yes? Or were you like, I don't really know if I want to do this?
So after this whole school board situation, we had all these just big ideas. This is my resurgence. I was like, I have ideas. And like people are listening, like superintendents, like, I'll talk to you. And I'm like, great. Yeah. I think we should have an advisory board. I think that advisory board should look at all the law, all the rules, all of the standards at the school district. I think that we should have these type of community people in it. We had a community group that we built off of it. And from there, I started to get invited to like organizing, meetings. So I ended up going to like this organizing meeting, convening, which I think is like the same group that Obama ended up organizing for, 100 years ago. And then from there, when I got back from there, this a dude who I never met in my life was just like, okay. The first thing he asked me was like, what do you think about capitalism? These are the things that get you in trouble. I was like, I think that capitalism and racism are inextricably linked. And he's like, do you want to run for state house? This is how it happened.
He's like, bingo.
That is literally how it happened.
No, okay.
That is the exact conversation. And I was like, what are you talking about?
So did you, because I know when you eventually ran for Congress, and it was a very tight primary, I think you won your primary, or first one by less than 1%.
Like 950 votes.
So did you feel like you'd already kind of done the like coalition building groundwork that you needed to do?
We did a lot of coalition building.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Was it, I guess, kind of what did you learn from that period of time about kind of who you had to bring in, who you had to engage? Because primaries are hard because it's not high propensity people.
Our primary was actually not hard at all.
Interesting.
Until APAC got it.
Okay.
I look at the stats sometimes. I know that sounds super arrogant. And I'm not saying it to sound arrogant at all. That's not what my intention is. My intention is actually to talk about how just overwhelming it can be when that type of money comes in, irrespective. Like you can put in all your groundwork. We've been putting that groundwork in since before I ran for state house. When we were doing that school board work, that was when we started to really organize around electoral politics, right? Yeah. We got new school board members in over like a 3-week campaign. We transformed the school system. We started to move up. The progressives in the town were just invigorated, and they started to invest in candidacies. Like me and another woman who's now our county executive, we decided to run for state house at the same time. We also decided to do it like let's do this together. Like we can share resources. We can invite people. Like that really, I think, set the stage for people in our area being like, oh, we should actually be knocking doors. We should actually, do fundraisers. We should engage in local politics. So we started to bring in people from, neither of us were from the exact same district, obviously. We brought in people from different districts. People were like, oh, we can get progressives in certain seats. So we started to get more strategic. After my race, I created, with some other folks, my now chief, we created this APAC, because we were like, there are gaps that we still need to fill. That like progressives and candidates of color, marginalized candidates, it's really hard for them to run. It's unusual for us to run win the first time. So we did work.
Yeah.
We did work. We met people from all demographics, all backgrounds, from different communities. They were excited about our race. And in my congressional race, when we ran for that, we polled, by 4 weeks out, we were up by 25 points. By 3 weeks out, they put the first million in.
Yeah.
By 2 weeks out, they had closed that 25-point gap to a dead heat. It was a deadlock.
So was it a little bit of like a fight fire with fire situation of like you were against institutional support from very big money in that race, and it's like you have to, as you just said, like you can do all the local on the ground engagement, but sometimes that only goes so far, and there's this you've got to at least try to make up the difference a little bit, right?
We had to last at that point, right? We had to remind people. Well, first of all, I think people were overwhelmed.
Yeah.
The ads were incessant. It was like wall-to-wall coverage. You know, you wake up in the morning, and you cut your television on, and you would get 10 ads before you got out to work. You know, you go to work, and on your phone, there they were, because they followed you on digital. YouTube, like your kids are watching Cocomelon, and there was an ad. You know, there was an ad on Cocomelon. It was like, you could not avoid it.
Hey, they know they have captive parents there who have to listen to it.
Somebody's monitoring these kids. No, but what we counter that with was, we did knock our doors, right? Yeah. We did our organizing. You know, we talked to people. In those last days, that was one of our first congressional, you know, races ever where we had vote by mail. We had to call people, and we were calling a lot of like elders, and they were like, but doesn't she support Trump? You know, so we're like not counteracting truth. It's not like they're saying, I don't want her because she's a progressive. They were saying, well, I don't want her because she supports Trump, because that's what the mailers were saying. So those type of tactics are, you know, you can overcome them when you are just not getting blown out.
Yeah.
You know, we got outspent, but we didn't get outspent to the extent that you see in like Cori Bush's race and Jamal Bowman's races. And like, you know, so we were able to start to claw back, start to bring back people who were like, maybe this is a bit much. We actually need to do some research.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you asked, I don't know what the actual number of the polling is, but I think taking party affiliation out of any of that, if you ask most people, do you want to take obscene amounts of money out of politics, you'd have really high support for it. And so it's one of those things where it feels like this race to the bottom, and it
doesn't feel like it is.
And we haven't found the bottom yet, and that's what always blows people's minds. It's just like it feels like you've hit it, and then there's a new you know, and for some of these races that are state house races and city council races,
be this expensive.
No, it's like, who needs to spend millions of dollars on a city council race? But it is happening, and it does, I think, blow people's minds a little bit.
Yeah, and it also harms our democracy.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think it's just like a race to the bottom. It's basically like an arms race. You know, who now, it's like, as tactics are created, you know, as precedents are set, you know, new interest groups are saying, oh, that's a pathway. That's something that we can replicate. So all it does is it invites more and more money in. Yeah. And you see them most likely in districts where you have working class candidates, right? Where those districts where there's more likely to be Black and brown, more likely to be working class. Yeah, it's easy to go into those districts.
What is, on the kind of money in politics, have you had any, you know, you don't have to name names, industry and stuff, have you had any just like crazy interactions with someone like a lobbyist or something like that in your time in Washington where they were trying to sway your vote and you were like, I don't do that?
You're not going to believe the answer.
Okay.
No.
Maybe they just know inherently, like,
the lobbyists don't ask me for anything. They've never asked. From my time from the State House to now, I don't know why. No one's ever trying to whip my vote.
Well, that's an interesting thing. I remember AOC talked about this in an interview not too long ago, where she was talking about the fact that when she got put onto the Energy and Commerce Committee, that just how much outreach she started getting from these lobbyists.
That's a big committee.
Yeah, and she's like, you know who I am. I'm not the person that you're going to be able to call up and try to swing with this. So it's,
but you know what it is they think? They're like, well, yeah, but you know what? You're in the big leagues now. You know, don't you want to stay on ENC? You know, don't you want to continue to be able to build up the type of influence so that we can, you know, pass a Green New Deal, so that we can, you know, do something real about climate justice?
So you think that's the thing where people...
I think that's the thing that would make them think they can call.
Yeah.
I think they're wrong.
Yeah.
But I think that if we're thinking about like, what is the difference here? I think that's the thing that would make them think that they can do it.
And I think that will be interesting as people like that or people like you get elevated as they continue their political journey. There's going to be that, like, remaining committed to all of those values.
Yeah. But institutionally, but that's the thing that, like, when we talk about like the inside-outside strategy, the inside is an insidious pit.
Yeah.
You know, how you move, how you get elevated, how you get committees, how you get bills. Right? Does your bill ever get called up? You know, this is whether you're the majority or the minority. If you want to be on those powerful committees, there's an expectation that you are going to donate to the DCCC, right? That you're going to contribute. There's the expectation, obviously, that you maybe not do things. I think they're starting to relax on that, and I think it's because more younger, more progressive people are starting to exist and starting to be like, is that actually the best way to do it, right? Is that the best way to do it? But that has been the expectation for so long, that if you want to be in the big leagues, then you have to give something. And that we are only now seeing people say, well, listen, I can't do that. First of all, I can't give to the DCCC if I can't expect that I won't get blown into my primaries by obscene amounts of spending.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think there's also there's the financial part, and then there's also like the procedural part. I think hopefully that's loosening up a little bit too, where I think
a little bit.
And it's like baby steps. I get it. But I think there's a little bit of that too, where it's like, okay, well, we've elevated you and put you into this, and now you've got to follow the rules that have been there forever.
I think there's going to be a dam break.
Yeah.
Right. I think that we are at that line.
It feels like it. Yeah.
Yeah. For a couple of reasons, right? Even, the whole idea of seniority and who can run for ranking member, right? The oversight race wasn't even the only one where we just saw just vastly younger, not just in age, but younger in age too, but also younger in seniority people saying, why can't I step up to leadership? And it didn't actually start this time. Jamie Raskin, is not somebody who's been in, Congress since the 80s, right? Yeah. Jamie Raskin is somebody who is brilliant, caught a moment and showed that he could lead. And then he wouldn't ask people to lead. And it's not just him, right? If you even think about like Hakeem and them being there, younger, less seniority, they're starting to chip away at that.
I'm going to be honest. I have to say it. They've got to stop putting Hakeem Jeffries and like aviators and the bats and all that. You don't have to say anything about it. I'm like,
I don't know about the bat.
Yeah. I love listening to him speak. And sometimes I'm like, why are they putting him in this stuff? Sorry, I hate to go on the record and say it, but I'm just going to do it. I know. Well, we'll see. So I know I've talked to Delia about this, but you're in the squad, you're tagged with that. When that happens, do you feel like sometimes like those labels for you can be like flattening and kind of just put you like, hey, she's in this dimension, she's the squad, and that's it? Like, do you feel that, and how, like, do you try to resist that ever?
I think that people wanted me to feel flattened by it.
Yeah.
It was a thing from my race when I was running, You could always tell there would be people who would be like, yo, she's going to be in a squad, but they were saying it with like excitement. Mm-hmm. And then there were also people who were like, she's going to be in the squad. And they were clearly saying it in a way that was like, don't vote for her. She's a radical, right? So we were getting both. And my thing is that those women, because it was women and Brother Jamal at the time, those are people who are taking the bravest stances that you can take, right? They know that it's easier to, toe the line. They know that, but they did it anyways because they were trying to make it easier for when the next generation of people came. So people wanted us to when they were saying it that way, they were hoping that we would throw them under the bus. They were always trying to give us opportunities to do that. Yeah. Listen, don't you think it would just be because they would use them like kind of as a weapon, and it's always inviting you to do that. So anyways, I was never going to do that. But also, why wouldn't I want to be with a group of, history making women of color who are trying their damnedest to change the way that this institution works? If you are a real progressive, then you know that it's not just your policies, it's your politics. Mm-hmm. What we are trying to do is say, hey, we get it, we want a Green New Deal. That's why we don't do our politics. With oil and gas, hey, we want Medicare for all. That's why we got to do our politics with people who were trying to ensure that, right? We're trying to shift the way that people do their politics. So I think that that's commendable. So I was always good with that. But I'm not just squad, and not that would that would be enough. I am still Black. I'm in the Black caucus, right? I mean, there are people who came into 118th Congress who are not in the squad. They're squad adjacent, as people call them, or they're progressives. There are people who I got love for. At the end of the day, I want to be aligned with the people who are trying to get us to liberation and justice. Yeah. I want to create an opt-in. I want more people to feel like they can come over and move like us. That's the goal. We want more people to be squad.
Well, that's the thing is you just talked about policy versus politics, and obviously the tent has to get very big moving forward. It just has to. They're going to be from what you believe versus someone on the who's dead center or center left. It's going to be really different. But I think you're right about the politics aspect of it. I guess my question for you is, how would you overhaul like how Democrats message once they're back in power? Because it clearly up until now has not worked very well.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Before I would make a suggestion on messaging, I would have to make a suggestion on how we move the first thing that Democrats has to do before we keep talking about messaging. And why isn't our messaging resonating? Why? Because people don't believe us.
Yeah.
We have to do something about who we are. We have to identify ourselves. We can't be the party of, the corporate, of corporations and the party of the people at the same time. We got to choose what master we're going to serve. Our messaging will never resonate with people, authentic people who can tell that we are not authentic. So when we're telling people that we thought that democracy was at risk, people wanted to see us move as if that was the case, right? Our we got to walk it like we talk it.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Or else it feels hollow.
Yeah. Right? People recognize that. So they see the antics, right? They see, I ain't calling nobody out. They see the Instagram, they see the pictures, they see, the new curse words people use on us. They see all that. And none of that matters. They're like, you're not real. They want to see us be real first. So if I'm going to have a working class message, economic populism, however you want to call it, my message is just that in the wealthiest nation on God's green earth, everybody should have a living wage at their job. Everybody should be cared for. They should have a home in the community that they call home. They should not go broke doing any of those things.
Yeah.
That's not going to resonate with people when they know that you've been disconnected from the class struggle forever. You've never experienced it. That's not going to work when you talk about youth being the future, but then you stop every young person who tries to come forward. They see those things.
Well, and I think that is a good point where it's what you just stated seems like if you went to any Democratic member of Congress, whether they're center left or far left, that they would all say, yes, we share that goal. And so is part of
message
it too.
As action.
Yes. Okay.
Your action needs to be your message.
Yeah.
Before you open your mouth, the things you do needs to it should be predictable what you're going to say because you have done these things. Like, again, but that's what I said, policy versus politics. Yeah. Everybody says that people should have health care. But again, who's still in bed with Big Pharma, right? Everybody says that we should have affordable housing, but who's still in bed, with developers, landlords, right? If you're listening to more landlords than you even know tenants, right? If your tables that you've created don't even include tenants, don't include people who have ever lived in public housing, then your message and your actions don't match.
Well, then you're just talking above people who...
No, you're just talking.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's not even above them. You're just talking.
Well, I mean, I think that is also the tough thing, or the tough question is there's like the coalition building side of this and the big tent, and then there's like balancing the moral clarity of that as well with building the tent and maintaining the moral clarity that you have. And I'm sure that's a hard line to walk, right? Do you get it? In terms of...
I get it.
Okay,
I'm wondering, is it hard?
Yeah, I'm like...
No, it's not hard for me. But because I have a focus, right? My focus is getting money out of politics, right? Because if I can stay focused on the thing that I think will help, the thing that I think might be liberating, because I do think that there are people in government who, I don't think that everybody who gets in government is like, I want to get in government so I can insider trade one day.
Yeah.
I don't think,
I hope not, but
I don't think that that's the reason, right? I do think that there are people who came here idealistic about what's possible. They came from tough situations just like I did. I think there's some people who didn't come from tough situations, but they came from empathy. And you know what? They found out how grueling it is to run every 2 years. They found out how expensive it is to run every 2 years. They found out how easy it is for those lobbyists to start to wear them down. The lobbyist doesn't just come and say, they're not holding a gun to our head, but they are like, hey, you would like to not have that primary, right? Hey, you know how expensive that primary is. Getting money out of politics is the number one thing that we have to do to save our democracy, obviously. You can't have a reflective democracy if you have to pay your way in. But also, if you care about, like, how do we stop little kids from getting shot in schools? Well, like, if the NRA wasn't, a boogeyman, if they didn't exist, we'd already figured this one out, right? Yeah. We would have figured out why can you go to Canada and get your diabetes medicine, but you can't afford it in New York, right? We'd have figured this out. The influence, the fact that right now you can only give a member of Congress, somebody at the federal level, $3,500. For average people, that's a lot of money. But, for a candidate, we know that's not that much. But you can go and give a PAC any amount, $1 million, $2 million, $100 million, and do the same exact thing.
Do you feel like, and the answer to this can be no, but do you feel like that, so we're, as you've talked about already, we're kind of at this generational change moment. It feels like in 2026, we're going to see a big sea change, and we're going to see newer, younger members of Congress, hopefully, maybe. do you feel like that is something that is possibly bipartisan? Because that's applicable on the Republican side as well. If there's this new wave of younger people that come in, that while that's happening and before they're theoretically like corrupted, that maybe there's an opportunity to be like, okay, we can establish a ban on individual stock trading or a ban on lobbying after leaving Congress. Like, does it feel like that's even possible right now?
I think that the ban on like individual stock trading, some of those anti-corruption pieces, I think are going to get more bipartisan support. I think you're going to see a lot of bipartisan support for like those type of things from the rank and file, right? The rank and file R's, rank and file Dems. I think you're going to see the pushback from, the highest ranking, right? The speaker is the one who's not going to bring that to the floor, well, whoever the speaker is, right? A speaker wouldn't be, because, the speaker is the one who's like, well, I got to protect.
And they've been there for a long time.
I protect so-and-so member. So I think the money and politics piece, I think that we're going to need to see a groundswell from the outside. I think that the more that we can convince everyday people from outside that this should be like the number one issue, because again, all these things you want, right? What's the thing tying them up? That money and politics piece. Yeah. I think that we're not going to see that push from the inside, right? Because too many people benefit from it. Yeah. If you want to punch left because you believe that, the progressives are a scourge on, the Democratic brand, then those PACs that are willing to spend $10 million at a time. Yeah. Those ones are kind of like, they give you a little bit of plausible deniability. They take care of your frenemy for you, and you get to wipe your hands clean at it. And then you get to also say in Citizens United. Right? See what I mean?
Oh, it's such the puzzle of the whole thing is hard. It's like you're of course, like, people want more everyday people as their representatives.
They say
so
that.
People, I'd say people on the outside want that. Yeah. And then the problem is they go up against money and people who are connected and all of that, and so it's harder to get those people into office in the first place. And so
poor
it's
people
just
can't
this,
run
like,
for Congress.
Yeah.
And if poor people can't run for Congress, how is a poor person ever going to be a senator?
Yeah.
How do you run for Senate? That a Senate race could actually be $100, $200 million. What person from the working class, from a single black mom, is ever going to run for Senate? How are you going to get that money? Where would you get that money?
Wouldn't even know where to start.
As your mom would say, money doesn't grow on trees.
Yeah. The money in politics is sometimes like the most fascinating conversation I have in here, because it feels shift,
right from the early days of the Congress, of the United States Congress, when it was like it was a body of land owning wealthier white men, to today, where it's probably the most diverse that we've ever seen. Money in politics has the ability to change that course more quickly than any other force.
Just 250 years later, but we're gonna take it better late than never, hopefully. Right? So
quick U-turn.
And something else I know you've talked about too is just talking plainly to people. Like, you're very. It is easy to understand where you stand and why and what the value is behind that. I know you've always said that Democrats need to do a better job doing that. Like, is there a recent time for you where you've heard someone within the party talking very wonky and complicated and what do you say to them? Do you ever correct people and say, this is confusing to people and this is how you could do it? Because I think what I'm so fascinated with in this moment in time, especially as the party reworks and figures out where the future is, just how to simplify messaging and draw lines between things in ways that people understand. And I think you're good at it. And so I think I'm just curious if you ever gently call out colleagues for that.
I've never been known to be gentle. Yeah. On occasion.
You're right. I shouldn't have put that in there.
Though. I am goofy though, which is like, I hope is, is counterbalances out by very directness. On occasion, I've definitely been like, what the hell are you talking about? Yep. Right? Because you know what? Anytime someone uses an acronym at me, I'm like, I do not know what you're talking about. And I say that with no shame at all. Mm-hmm. Because I'm like, I'm a member of Congress. I do not know what that acronym is. Yep. So let me tell you who doesn't know what that acronym is. My mom. I use my mom a lot because my mom is my average voter. When I'm trying to figure out, is a message resonating? Is a movement moving? Is it getting around to like normal people? I use my mom. I'm like, Mom, did you hear about that? Mom, what's the acronym? She don't know the acronym, right? So acronyms, Capitol Hill speech, those type of things, I'm like, do not use that with me because I don't want to start to internalize it and to use it. Yep. We use those too much because I think people are trying to prove that they're smart that they're smart enough to be a congressperson. And I think that there was an era where people wanted that. But that's also when the electorate was shrunken, right? The people who were your super voters were the people who, usually were a little bit more affluent, paid attention a little bit more, had disposable income and time.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully, if we're doing this right, everybody's voting. Everybody is engaging in politics. Well, normal people, you don't got to prove that you're smarter than thou for them. They want to know that you are me. What you should be showing them is that you can be a congressperson too, right? Because this is a representative body. It's not an elite body.
Yeah. Okay. I know, busy schedule. I've got to let you go at some point. I've got 2 last questions, and then I'll let you get on your way. But I'm having a good time. So do you? Something Democrats got tagged with, especially in the whole postmortem of the election, was just like trying to please everybody a little bit, and because of that, not pleasing anybody. And do you have a feeling right now? I wish I had a better word for it, but that Democrats are almost like a little too afraid to make any enemies.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
No, because they don't care if the left is their enemies.
Yeah.
I know. I feel bad. Listen, you got to say it. I don't think that Democrats care at all if who they have labeled online leftists, radicals, whatever, what have you. Some have decided that they don't need their votes. They don't care if they make them mad. In fact, they've kind of used them as punching bag. It is just the reality. And I say it plainly because it is that important that we stop doing that. I think that the lesson that we have missed from the election is not the things that make people different. We always are trying to look at things on a linear, right? You're either a progressive, you're a moderate, you're a conservative. But most people, everyday people, don't actually operate on that type of linear scale. I think that people want to change. I think that people from all types of backgrounds found and have been finding that the system doesn't represent them, that the system has not changed their conditions. It has not made their lives easier or better. And they were hoping, praying, begging for somebody who would acknowledge that we need a shakeup. I think that people went for Donald Trump, because they were like, you know what? That man at least is saying that he's going to destroy the system.
Yeah.
And I might fare a little bit better in whatever comes after he's done destroying it than what is here now. And I think that Democrats are ignoring that because they are comfortable, because honestly, incumbency is like a racket. It's like our number 1 goal is incumbency protection. Our number 2 goal is, defend democracy. Right? No, that's the wrong priority.
Yeah.
And I think that too many of them have grown into that space. And I get it. These are our jobs. This is our livelihood. This is how we this is how we do the thing that we're passionate about. And it's also how we feed ourselves, just like everybody else who have jobs, right? But also we have a different job.
And some of this stuff is going to end up, you said, kind of destroyed by the end of the next 4 years, quite possibly.
If we even have that long.
And so something I actually spoke with when I sat down with Sarah Elfreth was the message can't be we're going to put it back how it was. It's you have to put it back better in the way before. It has to be improved.
I think she's 100% right.
Yeah.
And not only is she right, I think even to take it a step further, I don't think that there is anywhere to go back to. I think that the generational divide now in Congress and government are the people who understand that what was there before wasn't good enough in the first place, 1. And 2, that what's happening, what MAGA is doing, what the architects of all of this are intending and what have already done, it precludes us from even ever going back to that type of normal anyways. It was a one-way street.
Yeah.
And I think that there is the second cohort who believe and are nostalgic for that. They're trying desperately to get back to that. And they're impeding us from being able to plan and start to prepare for how we're going to take the reins to build what comes next. We need to be thinking about who's going to build what's next. Next is coming. If we keep thinking about the past, then we're forfeiting the ability to build next, to lead us into the next society, the next phase, which if you were, someone from, Bernie 2016, we all know that a better world is possible. We said a better world was possible, but somebody has to build that. So right now we need people in office. I don't care what age. I don't care about their age. I don't care about whether they're from a frontline district or not, wherever you're from. Being frontline does not, excuse you not having the fight right now, right? Being young, does not excuse you from not having the fight right now. We all need to be directing people and empowering people in this moment. We need to help them to see a vision, to help us to envision what comes next, and we need to move on. Well, this leads me to my last question, actually, is we are in this moment where people feel
rudderless and helpless. They don't know what to do. You are, again, from a working class background. You've like built yourself up. How do you convince everyday people right now that they still have power?
I have nothing but history. I have nothing to offer them but history. But in moments like this, throughout our own history in the United States, in moments like this for other countries throughout the world, power, real power, can only be wielded by the people. You know, I think that we are going through we've been going through like the stages of denial or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, where we were in that moment where we felt helpless, we felt, you know, hopeless. And then it's the first thing is like, well, what do you do? What will you do? And people were in that, you know, for a second. And in my town halls, very quickly they started to ask the question, what are you going to do? But it was also followed by, and what can I do?
What can I do? Yeah.
What can I do? And what I tell people is when we look at the movements of throughout history, you know, big transformational change was never led through your government. Big transformational change was led from the ground, from the people, from working class people, you know, from marginalized people, from people who are pushed to the brink, who have the power of their dollar. They have the power of their labor. There is a reason why authoritarians target labor, you know, labor unions and organizers. They target education because they want an electorate that doesn't challenge authority. They want an electorate that has never learned about ethics, right? They want all those they want those conditions to fester. But right now, if we are going to combat oligarchs, you got to hit them in their pocket. We have the labor power to do that. If we want to bring to the knee, you know, corporations that don't care about people while our democracy is failing, then we have the power of our dollar, right? We have the power to protest. Protest is not just for show. And I also am not one of the people who think it's bad. But I also think that members of Congress have sent mixed messages, right? They often send this message that protesting, strikes, those type of things are a lesser form, you know, of your civic duty. Why don't you be like us and just legislate? Well, what do you do now when you don't have a gavel? When you don't have the House, the Senate, the White House, the Supreme Court, the federal level courts, what do you do in that situation?
Well, and it's like, you got to get ready. You got to get people ready for
a
year and a half from now, or a little less than that.
But not just to vote. We got to get them ready for every contingency.
Yeah.
Voting is not the only tool that we have in our toolbox.
Yeah.
We have to teach them that. We have to acknowledge that when they tell us that voting is important. Do it. Absolutely.
But there are everyday things in your life too that you can do that will impact.
You know, we can target people who are mistreating us and who are abusing us. Solidarity is a very powerful tool. I don't think we make it out of this if the people are not mobilized. You know, if they are not included in our strategy, as we see the limitations of government. And I don't say that to try to push off my own power, but we see it, right?
Yeah.
I can't. What bill could I even write that would put a check on Donald Trump's power? That
Nothing
Mike
right
Johnson
now.
would bring to the floor. That then that they go to the Senate, and that Donald Trump himself would sign. None. There are none. We know that. People in every election is where you decide who you want to be the container for your power. You entrust the politician, you entrust these systems to your power, but it's still yours inherently. So we can't take it back for you. You got to take it back. So I think people should be the most hopeful right now. Okay. This is the moment. Movements of empowered and passion and sometimes enraged people have changed the course of history many, many times. This will be one of them.
And on that hopeful note, Congresswoman Summerlee, I thought we were going to have fun. I'm really glad we did have fun. I so appreciate you being here. I had a blast. I hope you did too.
I hope you mean that.
Thank you for coming on Building the Bench. Our door is always open if you ever want to come back.
I would love to.
Thank you very much.
I hope this place. This is the vibbiest place.
I know. I love it too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.